Now, let's keep flowing. Let's keep flowing. Now, notice this. Say no more toiling. Now, notice what we've went over so far. We've talked about, and I put this in your spirit, that kings and priests must line back up the way that it was in the old covenant. Why is that important? Because in the book of Malachi, Jesus, or the word says right there, behold, I will send my messenger, right? And it deals right there in that area, and it says, so that the offerings of Judah and Jerusalem will be pleasing unto the Lord as in the days of old. So that brings us back, okay, when was the offerings pleasing to God? It's when the kings and priests hooked up. So God is desiring that in the new church, the glorious church. Now, in order to get there with that mindset, you can't have one group thinking no toil and the other group thinking toiling, right? You got to have both of them thinking like the image of God. Why? So the movie can run right. When the movie ain't running right, I mean, that's why you get the glitch film. You see the split in the film? We can't have that. We got to have it flowing smooth. Frame by frame. Tell your neighbor, frame by frame. Say flow. So that's what that's talking about. That's what I'm talking about. You got a constant flow. Now, notice here in Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3, verse 17, it says, unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened to the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree which I command thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. So notice here the word says that God cursed the ground. God would never curse man. That'd be like cursing himself. He ain't going to do that. He made in his image. God going to make something in his image and curse himself. No, what he did is he cursed the ground. Now, what did that mean? That meant that the ground would no longer produce it by divine authority. That God had to intervene himself to make the harvest come to pass. So vitally important. So what did man have to do? Man was now forced, as we can see here, it says, for thy sake in sorrow thou shalt eat of it all the days of thy life. Now, the word sorrow there is the first time that man ever heard the word sorrow. So in sorrow, say toil. So sorrow now is a form of toiling. So Adam now is in a place where he usurped authority. He's now in a place where he has to toil. In other words, his labor, listen to this, he's going to be labor intense without divine help. Labor intense without divine help. Now, remember when I started earlier and I talked about, I said, you must hear from heaven in order to see all manifestation. A lot of things that we do in our jobs, if you will, but that's what we're working. A lot of things that we're doing on there to whether expand or to move forward is that we're doing it without divine help, which causes us to toil. It wasn't like Adam didn't work in the garden. He had a job he had to work. He wasn't going to sit there and just look at everything and let it grow. No, he had to till the ground. We'll deal with that. We'll talk about that shortly. So now, what's happening here? The word says that in sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. So in other words, he was going to toil to be able to get the fruit out of the ground. And in verse 19 it says, in the sweat of thy face he shall eat the bread. So in other words, what we see here is that we see a picture, perfect image of man toiling in scene 2. You getting it? Scene 1, no toil. Say no toil. Now, what we want to get a revelation on is that we're not trying to get back to scene 2. We're trying to get back to scene 1 and live in scene 1, not scene 2. Now, what you got is you got good believers living in scene 2. Come on, say something about that. So in other words, you got good people. They're still sweating. They're still toiling, and they're in sorrow. Why is that? Because we're moving ahead of the voice of God. See, because nothing is permitted until the Spirit of God speaks. When the Spirit of God speaks, then that what you've spoken about has been approved for your life. Now, if you started in the middle, if you started in the Gospels with your walk with the Lord, and then everything you're hearing half complete. Because you have no revelation that you're made in the image of God. A lot of you just made an image of being, and you made an image of Presbyterian. You made an image of a Christian. You made in the image of being Baptist, Methodist. You made in those images.